to everyone who could tune in with us on today's webinar. So the topic that we will be talking about today is special needs in the time of lockdown. My name is Kalpana and I'll be the host of today's webinar. And today we have two amazing, beautiful speakers who are going to share their thoughts on what it is like for people who have special needs and what is it like for caregivers who take care of people with special needs. And I would like to begin by giving a little introduction on our speakers. So our first speaker is Sangeetha Chakrapani. So she's from the Together Foundation, and she's a parent, and as I mentioned before, a founder and co-worker at Together Foundation. So Together Foundation runs a training and sheltered employment workshop at Mumbai for people with autism. Sangeetha believes that every one of us, including people with autism, have something to achieve and give back to this world. Sangeetha is a TEDx speaker and enjoys writing about her experiences with people of all abilities. I am honored to have you here today. Thank you so much for coming here, Ms. Sangeetha.
Thank you.
Now, our next speaker is Dr. Shabnam Rangwala. So she is a graduate in occupational therapy with over 30 years of clinical experience in the field of occupational therapy. Her experience spans from working with newborn infants to adults with disability. She is the CEO and trustee of Project Noor, a foundation set up with the vision of equal access to quality health and education for all. Now, I would like to begin our webinar. Before I begin, thank you so much for coming with us, Dr. Shabnam. It's an honor for us to have you here.
Thank you for the introductions.
So to begin with our first question for today, I would like to begin with Dr. Shabnam because, so I want to know, what is your story? What are both of your stories when it comes to working with people who have disability? So Dr. Shabnam, the stage is yours.
I'd like to begin with thanking my families with whom I've worked for all these years, because I derive my strength and my personality comes from whatever I have learned from them. So like my background experience has been, I've been working in this field for initially as a clinician, but as you grow into this field and as you learn more and more and you're working more and more with families directly, you tend to not only remain in the clinical segment, but also move into other segments. I've had the opportunity to work with an organization which is ADAPT, formerly the Spastic Society of India, where I have had the chance to do a lot of policy and rights related work for people with disabilities. I've also worked on government programs, especially focusing on early intervention. And my work spans from working with children and adults who have all the resource and the support, but a large part of my work includes people who really don't have anything or any facilities, or what we term as absolutely low resource settings. So that's where I'm currently, my work and a lot of it I'm trying to. We have a policy which is called the Rashtriya Bal Swasthya Karyakram, which is working with children in the rural areas, disabled children, and basically trying to work out an intervention methodology which will work for all children. So today, basically in my talk today, I'm not going to focus on those group of children, because obviously whatever we are going to talk, we wanted to reach an particular audience. So here I'm going to largely focus during my talk on children or adults in urban settings or semi-urban settings who have some kind of resources available. Like, access to the internet would definitely be something that everyone doesn't have. And so that will be the thrust of my talk during this webinar.
That is such a rich background, and it does provide proper structures to where the topics that we're going to be talking about. So Ms. Sangeetha, would you like to share where you come from?
So my journey with disabilities began as a parent, and today I have two twin daughters who are 16 years old and who live with autism. And we have come a long way. In these 16 years, I would say that definitely, while I hope that I have been able to impart some knowledge to them, I can very confidently say that they have also given a lot of knowledge to me. So as a family, we have grown. Their siblings, they have two siblings, and my husband, we have all grown along with Lakshmi and Jayanti, and we have learned as much from them as they have learned from us. And along the way, I felt the need to put up a working environment for people with autism that will help them to get ready for a life of independence and to help them to lead their lives after the lifetime of their parents. So, which is a significant area of concern for a person with autism, even for parents of people with autism, is how are they going to cope after our lifetime. So towards that end, we offer home programs for life skills, as far as life skills are concerned, for parents to work with their adults, their teenagers at home. And we offer at least a gamut of work areas that range across a bakery and a paper plate manufacturing unit, data entry for financial institutions. We run a shop. So through offering around 5 to 6 areas of training in work, we hope that a person with autism who works with us is gravitates towards at least 2 or 3 and picks up work skills which will help them in the long run and help them to be meaningfully engaged when they grow much older, when they are adults and when they grow into senior citizens. And when it gets hard to imagine, and when you see a 12 or a 13-year-old child with autism, we have to accept that one day he's going to be a 40-year-old, he's going to be a 50-year-old, he's going to be a senior citizen, and he or she must be able to work and be actively engaged for 6 to 8 hours a day. So that is the premise that we are working on, and I'm happy to say that we've come a long way.
Well, I am so elated with both of your answers because it shows how much of expertise these people have and all the enriching knowledge these two speakers who are here with us today have. So moving on.
Can I add something there? That
Of course.
I mean, having worked with younger kids as well as adults, so in the first initial few years, there is a lot of fear, denial initially. Then denial goes on to fear. There's a lot of fear, shame. Those are the things that parents experience. But eventually, I think they understand the long-term nature of the condition, and then there are parents who need to take up different models as Mrs. Sangeetha has with the Together Foundation, and create environments of what's going to happen with the children once the parents are not there. How can they occupy themselves? So yeah, parents go through their own journey, which is, documented, researched, and it's not something that we are just talking out of my experience or she's talking out of her experience.
So adding on to what you're sharing, one of the following questions are, what are some of the challenges or things that you can add on? What are some of the challenges that people who are part of this community face? And also, what are some of the challenges that caregivers face? So Ms. Sangeetha, would you like to share?
When it comes to autism, if you look at the challenges that typically a person with autism faces, one of the core areas I would say is the ability to express their feelings, their thoughts, their emotions. Having said that, there are many people with autism who are able to communicate freely, who communicate independently and confidently. But there are so many more who have significant deficit in the area of communication, in the area of social interaction, and comprehending the smaller and bigger things that you and I take for granted. So when you look at those challenges, the challenge then pervades into their other areas of life. So what does that mean? What it means is The greatest challenge that they face is the ability to get inclusion in society. You see, so where the learning environment, starting from schools, starting from training centers and colleges, and a work environment which provides inclusion. So nowadays, I'm happy to say that inclusion, the word inclusion has become a part of our vocabulary. Thank God for that. But there is still a long way to go. And this is the biggest challenge that people with autism face, is to get that inclusion, to get that extra support that they need, to learn extra support that they need in a training center, in a work environment, in an office, in a factory, in a hospital, or wherever they may be working. That extra support makes all the difference to them and helps them to be meaningfully engaged in society. So the world has to be ready to accept a little bit of imperfection. The same imperfection which we accept in ourselves in other areas, we should be able to extend that acceptance to people with autism. That makes a very big difference. So that is a huge area of challenge, which pervades into all areas of their lives, where acceptance becomes an issue, inclusion becomes an issue.
Shabnam, what is your take on this?
Yeah, so like I said, initially there is denial, and there is something which is called the medical model, because I mean, initially they are hopping from one doctor, trying to find a solution for this challenge that they have suddenly been encountered with. So there's a lot of denial and looking for solutions till they finally, and that's unfortunately the very important or critical period for the growth of the children that is lost. So it begins with doctors. If doctors are more sensitized, if they can right from the beginning, start to say that, no, this is the challenge and you're going to need support in these areas, and parents can then again be guided as to what kind of support in terms of therapy support or functional base that currently we're talking about that you don't need to go for therapy every single day, but we need to learn how to manage things so that they become more independent in the long term. But yes, Sangeetha has spoken about children with autism. So I'll cover the other spectrum, that is children with movement challenges or disability of movement. Their greatest challenge would be that they need help in all their caregiving activities, whether it is feeding the child, whether it's dressing. So do children with autism, but this is actual manual physical help. When it comes to a child with autism, there is some kind of guided help that may be required, and physically the child is able to do. Here, especially if we take the disability of cerebral palsy, there is this term that we say it's an intelligent mind trapped in a disobedient body. So the child or adult knows exactly what it is supposed to do, but the body is not responding in the way it is supposed to respond, because they have stiffness and they have tightness in their body. Their muscles are not listening to the commands that are being sent by the brain. So those are the different, and because of their lack of movement, then they would have a lot of secondary or tertiary complications, which would be stiffness, tightness, developing pain. Those were the things that would come over a period of time. Yeah.
Now, specifically in our time today, when we're going through things like the lockdown and the pandemic, specific to these instances, what are some challenges that people with disabilities face? And what are the effects of such a social event? What does that have on people with disabilities? So to answer this, Ms. Sangeetha, would you like to share your opinions and your take on this?
So just as any average person is getting frustrated by the lockdown. There is no rocket science here at all. It is, we are all going through the same thing, and people with autism and people with other disabilities are going through the same thing. It's not any different from, and the same understanding that we get during this tough period is what we need to extend to them. So it only thing is, can you imagine for a moment, suddenly we are robbed of our work routine. Suddenly we can't go to the places we are used to going to. We can't meet the people who we are used to meeting. We can't do the shopping that we are used to doing, right? The same, exactly the same thing is happening in the life of a person with autism. He or she is not going to the workplace that they are used to going to. They're not meeting their peers, they're not meeting their co-workers, their colleagues, their teachers, their therapists. So the difference is that you and I are expressing it. You see, so you have people taking to Facebook, you have people typing out their frustration in WhatsApp calls. Yeah, you have people messaging each other, video calling, Zoom, you name it. Can you imagine a person with autism who does not have this kind of communication at his or her disposal? Can you imagine the frustration that is building up? And there are many people with autism who do not have speech. You see, so there are people with autism with limited speech, limited communication, speech and communication, of course, not being the same. So you have people who do not have speech, but who use sign language, who use picture cards, who use pointing and things like that. But how much can it convey of what is going on in their hearts and minds? How can I find all the cards you tell me to show my frustration? Where are the cards? Where are the pictures? Where are the signs to show you what I'm going through? There are no such signs. There are not enough cards printed to show you the frustration that I'm going through, which can be expressed only through words. So that is something extraordinary which they are going through. So it makes it that much more excruciating when you're not able to vent out. You see, there is a huge change in routine. And while people say, there is a commonly held belief that people with autism do not require social interaction, that they like to be isolated and things like that. It is not true. It is just that they experience social interaction in a different way. It's different strokes for different people, right? So their way of social interaction, their way of enjoying others' company is more undemanding. It is not as much of yap, 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 that much of talking, that much of direct eye contact will not be there. But the experience will still be the same. So being away from it will create as much frustration in them as it creates in others. So this in turn happens, this in turn can lead to a lot of behaviors. It can lead to frustration buildup. It can lead to temper tantrums. It can lead to being angry, to being aggressive. It can lead to using abusive language. It can lead to incomprehensive behaviors, which cause a lot of anxiety at home for the parents and for the caregivers and for the siblings. No doubt about it. There's absolutely no doubt about it. It can create a lot of distress for everybody concerned. But the fact is that the biggest challenge, the biggest impact of the lockdown is the total and totally unexpected, effects of lockdown. And to give you an example of my own daughter, she's 16 years old, Lakshmi, and highly independent and very fond of going to work every day. So the first week of lockdown, she was very peaceful. But by the second week, she realized that, this is going to go on for some time. And she understood that nobody is telling her to wear her shoes anymore. No one is asking her to take her bag anymore. And nobody was asking her to wake up at the exact time in the morning. So she kind of figured that things are going to be really different. And suddenly, she started opening up the milk packets at home and pouring it down the drain. So every morning, by the time I woke up and went and caught the milk packet, I would find it cut neatly and emptied into the drain. She would open the fridge, take out the vessels of milk, curd, and pour them down the drain. So this went on for a week to 10 days. And we had no idea how to stop her. Obviously, we could not keep somebody stationed in the kitchen all the time to see what Lakshmi is doing. So, I tried talking to her, I tried explaining to her, I tried to give her alternatives. And then finally I realized that she is missing the work, she's missing the things that she is used to. So I need to give her an alternative. So she loves to work in the kitchen. She, at Together Foundation, she trains in a bakery. So you tell me, a regular household, how many vegetables can I give her to cut? Maximum I can give her 5, 6, 7. So I managed to get my hands on a huge gunny bag full of groundnut. Not shelled groundnut, groundnut with the shell. So every day I would give her a vessel full of groundnut. So cracking open that shell and removing the groundnuts requires some time and effort. So she had a good 2 hours of cracking open of groundnuts to do every morning, and that helped her really calm down. The 2 hours of work, and we would put on some music for her and tell her, this is your share of work to do. And that made a huge impact on her. And slowly, her attention got diverted from the milk packets. But it took me around 10 to 12 days to figure this one out. So all of us, parents, caregivers, families, are facing challenges with our children, our adolescents, and adults with autism. This is the time to really reach out to them.
Dr. Shabnam, I invite you to share your thoughts on this.
Yeah, what an interesting story. And like I said, parents really are the ones who have the interesting and the imaginative stories of the solutions that they come up with. But yeah, as a professional, I would say that the most that they have said is a change in the routine, which was for the first 8-10 days. They all felt a little that what is happening, why aren't they getting dressed, why aren't they going to school, or why aren't they going to a center or wherever they were going to on a routine basis. But like kind of the feel that I got from my parents is that over the last since it's been such a long time now, the children have adjusted to these routines, and now they know that they are going to be staying at home, and they have found the parents as well as they have found things to make them involved the entire day in some manner or the other, with support from external people. But especially for people with movement challenges, and especially focusing on cerebral palsy, they are not availing of any of their therapy which they need. Their movement therapy, it has much reduced because obviously parents are at home. There is the additional burden of the housework. There are some parents who are working from home. So I mean, if I expect that the parents should additionally do the therapy also, the movement therapy for this child, it's expecting a lot, and we would obviously end up with a caregiver burn. So the stiffness is, some of them are reporting that their body is getting stiff because they are moving much lesser than what they did earlier. Even if there is a person on a wheelchair, the wheelchair he had to transfer onto the bed, he had to transfer onto the bus or into his car so that he could go to his workplace, which a lot of movement has become restricted because of this lockdown, which is causing some challenges for them. And as therapists, we're trying to see how we can resolve these problems. So I think that in case of people with movement disorder, it's the physical ability or the physical movements which are reduced. There are alternatives, which I'm going to talk when we talk about the coping methods, which what else can they do within their home environment. Then the other thing is that because we're at home all the time, what is happening is We are munching, we are eating. And so children who are especially not having movement, their metabolic rate is, as it is, low because they are not able to move as much. And then the diet care is very important from the parent's perspective, to see that the child is not going to put on weight. Because if the child puts on some weight, it's going to be a challenge again for the parent in the caregiving that they may have to do. Lack of movement, which again affects your lung capacity and your heart capacity. So this lack of movement is, and your lung capacity is what you're going to absolutely need in this pandemic. So we are working on ways in which, I'm going to share a little later of what you can do to keep on improving. So that's something that they are going to need for their fight against this virus. Lack of support of assistive devices. So people, like, if you have earlier, you were able to go to a therapy center, and then the center had that standing frame, or the center had the walker, and the center had the parallel bars, etc., etc., whatever is needed for you to be able to move. Now that's absent at home for a large number of families. So again, trying to innovate and trying to give them solutions of how best they can create that same environment at home is also becoming a challenge, because we don't have anything off the shelf in our country. We anyways, in our existing situations, also have to innovate. We don't have that, okay, I can go and buy a standing frame from this particular shop, or I can go and buy a spoon, a special spoon that this child needs from this particular shop. We don't have that existing in our country with the poor resources. So that's again another very big challenge for the professional as well as for the families.
Dr. Shabnam, as you rightly mentioned, that there are some important, it becomes really important for us to actually cope with the difficulties we face when it comes to either being someone with special needs or caring for someone with special needs. Now, to begin, I'd like to begin by asking you to share, what are some of your ideas that you have on how people, as I mentioned, who either have disabilities or are taking care of those who have disabilities? What are some ideas on the ways they can cope?
So some more actually challenges which are existing for children. I mean, I'm sure that applies to children with autism also, and with children with other disabilities who are on medications. So they are not able to access their regular doctor. There are doses. I mean, if the children who have epilepsy or seizure disorder, their medicines need to be monitored on a regular basis. If there is a seizure, then there should be some changes in the medication. So now they can call up the doctor, but obviously their visitations have been stopped. And my personal example is that we do these medical camps in the rural areas. We ourselves haven't been able to conduct those. So those people have missed their medicines for the last 2 months. So we don't know how it's working for them. We are trying to give them contacts of local pharmacies where they can procure. But again, the resources is the challenge. They may not have the money to buy the medicines for those people. Then schools have stopped. So children with disabilities who are going to government schools, for those children, the midday meal, which was actually quite an important source of nutrition for them, has also reduced in the current times of lockdown. And now you want me to talk about some of the coping strategies. So I would say that this is an excellent and a brilliant time for us to work on functional based intervention. So functional therapy is what is gaining ground all over the world. In India, still we are not reaching over there, but probably this pandemic of COVID should give us time as a therapist to look at how do we work on functional based interventions. And when I say functional based interventions, I mean actually doing, not just working on your muscles for an activity like knee extension exercises or stretching the hamstrings, or stretching this muscle, not just that, or just practice sitting, not something like that. I sit for a particular purpose. I sit so that I can eat my food. I sit so that I can do my homework. So eventual goal should be a functional goal. And so hopefully this is a time for us to innovate and reflect on the way we are therapists are providing therapy, to look at absolutely functional based intervention. So some of the things that I have said, I mean, inputs that I have given is standing. Like I said, it's very important for children who have got physical disabilities. They need to be made to stand at least for half an hour, twice a day. There are some who have absolutely no physical strength, or their muscles are extremely weak. They've gone into contractures or tightnesses because of which they are not able to stand. So innovate. Again, innovate, or tell them how to, probably against the wall, using the dining table, against the window grill. These are the options, but try and encourage as much of standing. Of course, for the people who are economically well off, there are equipment, and they all of them have that equipment at their resort, where they can put the child into a standing position and then move away to do whatever work, and also occupy the child in a standing position. Then the other thing is using a lot of music and dance. So it's a time where you can encourage, you can put in some music, and then have a lot of movement activities, some basic, I mean, and it can be a family activity where the parent is also doing it. It becomes a physical activity for the parent also, and the family. And the minute I feel that once you involve the entire family in the activity, it becomes more fun, and everybody benefits. It's whether it's a child with a disability, it's your non-disabled sibling, or the parent, or the grandmother, grandfather, whoever. Walking, if suppose if the child is at a stage where they would be able to use a walker or a crutch or some walking device and be able to walk. We are living in small houses, especially in the cities. So if possible, at least try and give them some opportunity to walk 2 to 3 times a day. Let them go to the toilet, let them walk to the dining room, to their bedroom as much as possible. So in whatever space is available, you do your walk, the walking. And based on individual situations, they need to be encouraged. They can be tried to make them more and more independent in their living tasks. So then that will again have to be based on the individual family as well as the individual child. Based on the child's ability, of course, I mean, I can't tell that the child will be able to have the entire bath on his or her own. But during the school days, what happens is, because of shortage of time, parents tend to just rush up things. They are also always in a hurry. But here you've got the time, you've got the space. Give the child, okay, at least he only soaks himself, or he only learns how to take the mug of water and pour it over himself. So break the task down into smaller segments and practice one segment till he or she masters the entire activity. Then breathing exercises. Definitely, I've been recommending a lot of pranayama and for all the children. So especially when they are either in the sitting position or in the lying down position on their stomach, they can practice a lot of. You can teach them how to do either thoracic, that is chest breathing, or then abdominal breathing, which is going to improve or work on their lung capacity. Of course, playing games. This is a good time. I mean, all of us are innovating how to, our social circle is our immediate family as of now. So same applies to a child with a disability, be it autism, be it cerebral palsy, they can definitely, we can innovate different games for them and encourage them to make their own circles. That is, suppose you're a center and you have a few, you are in the same class, connect them through a WhatsApp group and ask them to, if not directly possible for them, you, the parent, can be the mediator. Yeah, and we're spending a lot of time, like I said, on cooking and eating. So probably engage the child in activities which will make them feel productive, as well as improve their gross motor and fine motor skills. Because here, for children with movement disorders, we are talking of improving their muscle coordination and muscle movements. So you can, and at the same time, you can incorporate, if it's a younger child, incorporate knowledge of colors, shape, size, textures, etc. So I think these are a few things, and I'm sure Sangeetha would have to add on some of these, or she may have some of her own.
And these are some very substantial ideas. Thank you. Ms. Sangeetha, I invite you to share some ideas that you have on the ways people can cope with this.
My first reaction would be to just reach out to parents and caregivers who are basically right now, they are solely in charge of executing any kind of programs for their adults or children with autism or other disabilities. And the lockdown is putting a lot of pressure on the parent and the caregiver in terms of the daily schedules that we face, right? So many of us used to have house help. We don't have that house help anymore. We are doing everything ourselves, something which in India we are not used to. We're used to having somebody coming and doing some of the basic cleaning for us. And suddenly that is not there. So the first thing that I would like to say is, nowadays there are, anywhere you look around you, there are webinars and there are online classes, online counseling sessions for dealing with the lockdown. And the most important thing is to customize it for your home. So when the first thing I'd like to say is not to feel overwhelmed with the kind of advice, ideas, and thoughts which are being given by different people, for coping with lockdown. So not to feel overwhelmed and to take what works for you, not to judge yourself, and to do what you can do best. So for example, I have significant weight issues, something which the Zoom fortunately camouflages my weight and shows the best part of me to the outside world. But if somebody were to tell me that, Sangeetha, why don't you engage Lakshmi and Jayanti with some Zumba, or why don't you do aerobics with them, or do on-the-spot jogging with them or something, I get very irritated. So it's difficult for me to myself engage in aerobics or jogging or Zumba is going to take a huge toll on me as an individual, much less doing it with my daughters. So if somebody were to give me that idea, I would customize it for my daughters, right? So that's the first thing we need to do, is to keep taking ideas and customizing them for our children. Second thing is, the second biggest coping strategy is that understand which behaviors to accept and which behaviors to work on. We have to be accepting that just as we are reacting to the lockdown, people with autism are also reacting to the lockdown. So we cannot impose some kind of a global discipline and expect a person with autism to behave the way he or she was behaving pre-lockdown. So you have to kind of play a delicate balance. So you may have a child or your adult who decides that he or she will wake up 2 hours later than they normally get up. So somebody who's getting up at 8 a.m. in the morning may decide, why should I get up? I'll get up at 10 o'clock. Or somebody who is ready to have a bath at 8 o'clock will say, I'll have my bath at 12 in the afternoon. So you may decide to let that go. But for example, you may have another person with autism who says that I will not change my clothes. I will wear the same pair of clothes on day 2 and I will wear the same pair of clothes on day 3. Now that is something where you will have to use behavior modification, because that's where hygiene comes. Hygiene becomes an area of concern, right? So that is something where you then start giving an alternative. You start working on behavior modification and try to see how best to get that person out of that behavior and to do what is supposed to be done. For example, even repeated washing of hands. There are many who may not be ready to put their hands in water again and again and wash their hands. And right now, that is a mantra. Wash your hands 10 times a day, 15 times a day. Every time you touch a packet or something or something or something, you have to wash your hands. So what if you have a child with autism who's not ready to wash his hands that many times a day? So that's when you have to start looking at offering an alternative and saying, okay, fine. You don't want to wash your hands in the bathroom. You wash your hands in the kitchen sink. You don't want to use a Dettol soap. Okay, you use a Santoor or you use a Medimix, or I'll give you a little. Those are the areas where we really need to then, there are certain areas we cannot accept. And there are some behaviors that we can let go. So that is where we need to do the little dance and see where are we able to extend cooperation and where we insist that they cooperate with us, right? And the third, idea that I would like to share is don't let go of a single opportunity. Sometimes the smallest of things, the smallest of signals can give you an opportunity. For example, I have 2 daughters with autism. So one of them, Lakshmi, she's very good in the kitchen. But the other one, Jayanti, she doesn't work in the kitchen at all. She has never shown the slightest interest at working in the kitchen. And she works a lot on the computer and she does data entry. So now at home, the opportunities for data entry are limited because everything is closed down. So the other day, around let's say 5-6 days ago, Lakshmi was peeling potatoes in the kitchen. And the moment Jayanti came out and saw her doing that, the speed at which she rushed into the kitchen to see what Lakshmi was doing. But she didn't have the confidence to pick up the potato and to start peeling it, So that is the time when I realized, oh, this girl is ready to do this. And I decided to risk it. And I gave her a few boiled potatoes. And I told her, why don't you give it a try? And since the past 5 days, every day she's sitting and doing some peeling, which makes her feel very good. So, we may we learn new things about our children during this period. It may create new areas of learning for them, new areas of opportunities for them. So it's a time to be very creative and it's a time to be open to doing new things. That's also something that we should bear in mind. And also get ready to, give yourself some time in order to give them the best. So it's all very well for me to say that, work with them and do this with them and do that with them. But then what happens to you? Who's looking after you as a caregiver? So we have to ensure during this period that we take enough care of ourselves. We ensure that we keep a little bit extra time for ourselves so that we can give the best of our, resources to them. That is something that caregivers have to watch out for. Self-care.
Yeah, so I'd like to add about the caregiver burnout also, which is, of course, having said all those options, they'll need to, like Sangeetha very rightly pointed, have to figure what works best for them. Yeah, I have given a suggestion of, caregiving. I know everybody's talking about washing their hands so many times a day and personal hygiene, but these kids are being at home as well as, changing their clothes from a night suit again to a day pair of clothes, again back into a night suit in the night, will cause caregiver burning. So they may need to just decide that, okay, we change them into a set of clothes once a day. We don't change them so many times, whether giving them a bath. So then every individual parent needs to make those informed choices based upon their own health, because yes, their health is prime important, and only then will they be able to take care of the health of the child.
Thank you so much for those wonderful ideas that both of you had to share. So moving on to our last question. We actually had two, but then due to lack of time, I would like to kind of look at it on a conclusive level. So what does the future of our pandemic look for people with disabilities? And most importantly, how can we as an entire human society be more accommodative and more helpful towards people who are part of this community? Because this is something that's extremely important now that we're in this all together. It is important for us to build, oneness with each other and be really helpful to one another. What is your take on this, Dr. Shabnam?
Yeah, so I really don't know what the future and how it's going to be once the lockdown eases and things. What I anticipate is that schools or centers which are working with children with disabilities will have to devise some new protocols of how they're going to work with them. We as therapists, there is a group who is doing the same thing, so that therapy centers, which are an important part, can start operating. There are some guidelines which will come out. There'll be, of course, a lot of schools, as even the Together Foundation has moved to the online, which may work for some kids, or may not work, especially if they are children with processing challenges or children with motor challenges. It may be difficult, the online versions for them. Even so, I think they will move more, the thrust will be moved towards home-based therapy, because parents will be very cautious about taking children to therapy centers for their needs. I think home-based therapy will be what will happen. And very rightly, what Sangeetha said is reach out. The more and more every professional, as a professional, it will be my duty to reach out at least to my own circle of parents and see that, okay, you are doing fine, is that, and connect them to, let them talk to one another at least. So building your own circle of friends or your circle of support, as you would say. And empowerment. This is a great opportunity for us as a society to work towards empowering these families. Empowering, I don't mean in terms of going and suddenly having some morchas or something like that. That's not going to happen. Empowering in their own needs. Empowering them as to how is the best way they can have their bath on their own if they're not able to do that. Empowering them with some options of how best can the mother reduce her support when she has to feed the child. So if there's a child who's severely disabled, a mother has to do, and she spends nearly 5 hours in the day feeding. So how can I work on reducing that support? I'm talking from a therapist's perspective. And research has shown that in all global calamities, it's people with disabilities who are the most vulnerable. In all previous earlier, they would probably be the ones who would be most neglected. So we are talking about a lot of these stimulus packages and for MSMEs and for the farmers and migrant workers. So I really don't know how that's going to trickle, and how in our country, in India, how that's going to trickle to a family with a child with a disability. There have been instances where I know, heard of stories where the child has been denied some urgent medical help that they needed because of this pandemic. So that's going to happen, and I think we'll just have to understand as we go along what are the steps. So as a society, I think what we will need to do is prepare them, prepare the families. I mean, everybody is talking about building immunity. So why should they not build? Why should children with disabilities be left out of that? So parents will need to work on building their immunity through good food, good, the natural techniques that are available through breathing. So, I mean, be prepared is what my message to parents will be. That keep important, I mean, you could be the parent, could also be the person who would get exposed to the virus, or vice versa. So I would advise that the parents keep a kind of a small diary or something available, either on the email, which talks about the likes and the dislikes of the child, some important things about the medications, or some important information in terms of how the child would have to be managed in case the parent gets the virus, and vice versa if the child does, because they are going to, I mean, there are some children who are going to have to visit hospitals, and their chances of exposure to the virus is definitely of exposure, and at the same time of contracting the virus would be, in my opinion, higher than others. So these are some of the precautions I would say that as families they should initiate, and as professionals we should encourage them in the journey and support them. That's the main thing. As general other citizens who are probably not having anything to do with disability, as of today they have no direct connection with a person or a family with a disability, is be empathetic, be understanding, be I mean, if you see a person with a family who's living next door, who's having a child with a disability, try and see if they have all their groceries. Try and reduce the mothers or the family's visits to the markets, which the neighbors can probably pull in. So those are things that general society can do in these current times. There are many other things that the society needs to do, but let's focus more on, in this time of the pandemic, what can we do. Yeah.
Ms. Sangeetha, would you like to share what your take is on this?
As far as looking at the future of where we are now, we have no answers as of now, and we don't know whether this is going to be a temporary period and we are going to go back to what we used to be. And I'm sure, and I hope and pray that that does happen and we do go back to a normal, regular life. But how long it's going to take is anybody's guess. Presuming for a moment, parents and caregivers, families of people with disabilities, with autism, must be prepared for both scenarios. So scenario one is that we presume that, let's say, maybe by the end of June, maybe by beginning July, we are allowed to at least go part-time, get out of the house for a couple of hours and go to school or go to college or go to a training center and come back. So in which case, I believe I have been given to understand that wearing of the mask and sanitizing your hands frequently and not touching things and people and surfaces is going to be our lifestyle for quite a few months to come. These precautions are going to have to be observed for a long time, and it's not going to be removed with the lockdown. So people with autism, children with autism, for them to take this kind of change, it's going to be very difficult. So parents need to start preparing now. So for example, we had a Zoom call with, nowadays Zoom is the way to go, and somebody who's
Going to change the world.
Not at all tech savvy like me has also got used to it. But we had a Zoom call with the parents of Together Foundation, and they were asking me that, Or what do we do if once the center reopens and my child just pulls off the mask and flings it down? So that's when I said that we need to start practicing wearing the mask and making it a normal way of things to do starting from now. So for at least an hour a day, you build it up to 2 hours a day. You have masks labeled for every member of the family. Make sure you wash and reuse the mask and make it a normal thing to wear the mask, so that you're not suddenly telling your son or daughter that, okay, fine, today you're going to work, come on now, wear the mask and don't you dare remove it. That's not going to happen. Get your child used to carrying a small bottle of sanitizer in his track pant pocket. Make it a way of life that once in a few hours, okay, chalo, everybody take out your sanitizer, come on, sanitize your hands. Train your son or daughter not to shake hands, not to give a hug, and to stop with a namaste. Now, this needs to be done weeks in advance. It cannot be done 1 or 2 days prior to going out and expecting them to jump up and do it and then feel bad or complain that they are not doing it. It is going to take time. So all of us have to start preparing, presuming that 45 days from now, we will all be able to move out of our homes. We will be able to go out for a few hours a day. If that time comes, and hopefully that time will come, how is my son or my daughter going to cope with a new way of behavior? So that needs to start from home. That's number one. Number two is the other scenario, which is, let's presume for a moment that we are going to have to work from home for at least a few months, and that the work environment is going to be available to us only after 3 or 4 months. In which case, we need to start getting really creative between parents and teachers and start creating simple, replicable tasks at home, which don't put pressure on the parent, but at the same time gives an opportunity to your adolescent or your child or your adult with autism to be engaged. So for example, the teachers of Together Foundation, what we are doing is 3 times a week, we are making video calls to our adults with autism, our students, all of them, autism or otherwise. We are connecting with them over video calls so that one, there is a interface, face-to-face connect, so they feel happy to see us. Two is that the communication program is still continuing. So we are working with them on the area of communication. And number three is, if the situation so demands, 1 month from now, 1.5 months from now, if we are not able to reopen the center, we take advantage of these video calls, which we are doing 3 times a week. So hopefully our students will be used to it by then. We start getting them to do small activities at home. We start interacting with them. And because it is not easy to teach online to people with disabilities, it is easier said than done. It is going to take a lot of effort on our part and their part.
Parents.
And there are no guarantees about which way it will go. We can only try wholeheartedly and hope for the best. So the second thing is, as I said, to get ready. How are we going to work? And the third is, as far as the outside world is concerned, my favorite example is, if you know that there is a person in your building, living in your vicinity with a disability, and if you know that he or she has a special skill, whether it is to make a paper bag, or whether they are selling cookies, or whether they are doing something else, use that as a bridge to reach out to that person. Of course, this is not applicable to the period of lockdown, but I am talking in a generic sense. The moment you know that there is a person with a disability in your vicinity, find out what is that one thing, and believe me, every person has something special that they can do. Use that as a bridge to connect with them. And it is possible. That is my favorite message to people, is to find a reason, an excuse to connect with a person with disability. Don't give up.
We come to the end of our webinar with such amazing ideas presented by our speakers. I'm truly grateful to be their host, and this brings what they have shared brought threw a lot of light on the reality of what it's like to be in the community of those with special needs. and how we as a society can help and how they can cope. So many enriching things were covered today, and I am so happy. With this, I would like to say thank you to Dr. Shabnam and Ms. Sangeetha for their valuable contributions today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kalpana. It's been wonderful having to share, and sharing also enriches us too. It
Yes.
makes our mind sharper and makes us think of new ideas. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Doctor.
So along, any of you are willing to contribute whatever you can, you're welcome to do that. For further information on what Heartfulness is, where we come from, what we do, you can visit the links in the description that will be attached with our video. And also, my last message to everyone is that we have webinars every day at Heartfulness Wellness, covering topics that are really holistic in nature, talking about different aspects of life. And most of them like generally talk about how we deal with things and enhance our health in the present time today. That is with the lockdown and the pandemic and everything, and how we can move forward. So I invite all of our viewers to visit those links. And with that, I'm signing off. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, viewers. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.